starts now.
Listeners of the BBB podcast know that I'm a football fan at a fairly large level. That includes any game with physical contact and huddles that advances the ball by passing, throwing, or kicking. When one league or game isn't happening, I switch to another, learning its game and enjoying the action. So when play was suspended, then halted entirely earlier this year in the Australian Football League, it was more than a little disheartening. The AFL was my backstop during the months without North American football, and I grew to really love the game. While teams made it through the first weekend of their season, play was stopped as Australia went into shutdowns and distancing measures. However, the AFL has been playing to soundtrack audiences or reduced crowds, depending on the state in which the game is hosted, since the second week in June. And without the Canadian Football League in play, the Australian League has been a most welcome addition to this summer. Speaking of the CFL, brief update. They've been shopping every possible federal department, committee, agency, and board to see where the taps of financial support might flow, all to no avail. The latest deadline for a decision on some sort of a 2020 season was July 31. That came and went. Unofficial word is that the league representatives are now pitching the highest possible level of the federal government's hierarchy with a plea for $30 million. No word on when the decision might be made there. The CFL still doesn't have a collective bargaining agreement in place to move forward. On a positive note, however, should they proceed with field action later this summer, a bubble scenario has been worked out in Winnipeg. On the NFL front, preseason games were to start this weekend. However, in late July, the commissioner announced the cancellation of the 2020 preseason schedule. The regular season, however, is still scheduled to start in the second week of September. Fingers crossed. In this first week in August, the only live football games available on television are from Australia. But in an interesting glimmer of hope, if it can be called that, it was reported in the first week of August that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his partners had purchased the remains of the XFL for $15 million. You'll recall that the XFL, which was reborn in February of this year and ended without completing its first season, officially filed for bankruptcy in the early spring, just on the heels of the pandemic. In a press release, Johnson cited his passion for the game, saying that he looks forward to creating something special for the players, fans, and everyone involved for the love of football. Now, this isn't a done deal. It still requires court approval, and that's if there isn't a higher bidder for the assets. But fingers crossed. The Rock's involvement in football extends well beyond his acting role in Ballers. As a Canadian-American, he played briefly for the CFL's Calgary Stampeders in 1995. More interesting, though, is the fact that Dwayne Johnson is a superb promoter and entrepreneur, whose talents have excelled in endeavors ranging from film to tequila production. The XFL is not dead yet, and may in fact continue doing what many of us hoped it would: offer a development opportunity to players not in the NFL, and give fans the game of football continually throughout the calendar year by presenting games in February, March, and April. The coming weeks will tell. Until then, we have plenty of high-performance action from down under in the AFL's 18-team league. At this point in the standings, the Brisbane Lions and the Richmond Tigers are looking pretty good. Visit more episodes at stephenchristiansen.ca. This podcast is available on all streaming platforms including Anchor, TuneIn, Apple, and Spotify. I'm Stephen Christiansen. Thanks for listening.
Production of Stephen Christensen. Podcast complete.